Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us again for our Wednesday afternoon work from home webinar sessions here with Patak Solutions. This week we'll talk a little bit further just on continuing to build the work from home and remote work capabilities and the muscle there. Based on some customer feedback as we've been doing these webinars over the last couple months, we had some good input from some of you on these calls and looking for more tips, tricks, and ideas on how to continue to build some of the competencies and capabilities for everyone working from home. So we'll dig a bit further into some of that today. Hopefully my slides are moving along, and if not, just pop into the chat and let me know, but otherwise we'll get right into the agenda. So as everyone is working remote and or as of tomorrow potentially returning to work and getting into a more of the future state hybrid, which I think we all know is now going to be somewhat of the new norm operating procedure. Here's just a couple themes that we want to make sure we're talking about here on the call. With me is my colleague Brittany Lamaro, so she'll be probably chiming in from time to time and offering her opinion from a user side with some of these remote work tools, since she, like everyone else, has been remote for the most part for the last few months and looking forward to selectively getting back into the office. And I think let's make sure at some point we'll talk about how we're utilizing Microsoft Teams and shifts as part of that. So first and foremost, considerations for staying secure. Everyone's working from outside the four walls, putting more strain on the access points from externally. Here's some things to think about, and just some things we've seen, again, more from the user point of view, pop up. In particular, I'll drill down to skip over to the third one, keeping your work data on computers and saving locally. Trying to just remove that as a data leakage point is something of an easy win of sorts. The pushing and forcing people to do updates on a regular basis so everything is staying patched and updated is a big piece as well. Brittany, did you have anything else you wanted to call out or things you've heard from people?
Yeah, I think the secure email program is really important consideration. I know that as businesses start to move to more digital-based operations and maybe using Gmail accounts, or I think it's just important to consider some of the security breaches that have happened recently when storing like either customer data or patient data in the case of AHS. I think that was last year, and compromising. And I think just keeping your customer trust front of mind and ensuring that you have proper security measures in place just as you're starting to scale up and put those pieces in place.
Multi-factor. I skipped over that one, but if you do one thing, MFA, and if it's properly deployed, it's truly not that much of an encumbrance, whether that's fingerprint or PIN code or a combination thereof. It should be part of your standard operating procedures at this point. From a compliance point of view, just some thoughts to put out there. I know people like to use what's quick, simple, easy. The use of WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, I think, are two that warrant some thought and consideration. Sure, it's quick and simple easy for people to communicate in a relatively unstructured fashion, but what's being communicated? What kind of data leakage is there? What kind of retention policies or prevention of data loss do you have around that? So I don't know, some thoughts there. If you have anything, Brittany, but I think those are a couple of the ones that we've seen as cropping up as some shadow IT type of apps.
Yeah, totally. So I think there's a lot of risk when you're starting to have business conversations in a solution like WhatsApp. I mean, having, I guess, accountability and also understanding that work conversations are still a part of work, I think helps. When you're using an app like WhatsApp, it just I think it opens a can of worms that maybe you're a little bit less accountable for what you're saying. And also, if I leave the company, and I'm sending information on something like WhatsApp, there's no way for a company to be able to find that information again or to be able to access it. So having those tools in place, like you said, avoiding shadow IT, is just really important when you're starting to move into the
digital. It doesn't need to be
world.
negative either, right? That can be, if there's data leakage, we're automatically, I think, kind of assuming a negative position on this, but there could certainly be a lot of valuable company information that's just there's never been proper line of sight to it and not leveraged within the organization as a whole. So just bringing things within the realm of the organization where it can be managed and utilized to the best possible extent is something I think to bear in mind, and things you can definitely do with all of the Microsoft stack or any of the products that are out there. I think you just need to, it's more at the policy level, right? To apply the proper policies and what do we do with data storage? How long are we storing or retaining records for? What's our retention policies? How do we handle things like employee offboarding of their content and things like that? Moving on, GDPR. Brittany, what do you think? From a marketer's point of view and communicating with people, what do you think about this?
Yeah, in the marketing side of things, obviously this is something that has to be front of mind, but it's not necessarily just for marketing. And I think when you have systems that are built around GDPR and staying compliant, it's not something that you need to constantly be worrying about. If I'm sending out this form, will it be GDPR compliant? I know for us, just working with the Microsoft stack, knowing that all of people's information are flowing back into one spot. If someone requests that information, I can easily send it. So it is something that you're always considering, but at the same time, it's nice to know that you're compliant, at least from the standpoint of being able to provide data back, and that having one clear central repository for data that's being collected.
A little bit Microsoft centric here, but certainly if you are already down that path of using Microsoft's 365, maybe you've seen this graphic before, maybe you haven't, but here are, I'll say at the top layer, some of the apps that you may or may not be using to some extent, or some more than others. Certainly the Exchange and possibly the OneDrive aspects more heavily than maybe the Power Apps and Flow pieces, for example, but certainly all elements that are available to you to utilize. Incredible amount of flexibility in terms of how you build the security model, in terms of whom can access what and what they can do, where they can store things, how long information is shared, with whom it's shared, those types of things. Really, from a data security parameters underneath the iceberg, so to speak, you've got a ton of capability in the Office or the Microsoft 365 groups. I think we're missing a word there. It should say Microsoft 365 groups, Microsoft Graph, and the overarching trimming and perimeter of the Microsoft security and compliance engine. That's really what's driving a lot of this behind the scenes. So I know, don't feel overwhelmed, and I think just as a general blanket statement, everybody feels like they aren't making the best use of all of the Microsoft product. These are kind of your core table stakes in terms of what the user, the organization ought to be looking at using, and don't feel bad. No one's using all of it, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think one of the nice things about whichever direction you go is when you're going with a suite of products, you definitely avoid that shadow IT a little bit more, knowing that people have the tools. So whether it's they're looking to just have a collaborative chat, or if they're looking to host a video or a recording, they have a spot within a suite of products to do that, so that there's not like a bunch of different separated pieces that you're now, again, if somebody leaves the company, trying to guess where that's being stored or where that conversation took place.
Mm-hmm. Shifting gears a bit here, just getting into the cultural aspects of an organization. How do you do that where maybe people are, for a period of time here, at least in the last quarter, have been working at home, but as we start to open and return to normal and shift into phase two, where people are returning back to the office, how does that hybrid workplace function? Or what are some of the things that you need to think about maybe building into the culture, just the knowing that it's going to be a little bit more dispersed and not the traditional face-to-face format that maybe has been in the past? So just a couple things that we've done in the last couple of months here. One, the intranet and really religiously pushing out weekly updates in terms of what's going on in the both inside the organization in terms of our business activity, but also outside and in terms of what's going on in the city and in the province, just so everybody is somewhat connected in that regard. Use of Teams for various things in terms of everything from simple kind of quick powwows on a virtual coffee meeting in the morning to our weekly wrap up virtual Friday beverages Friday afternoons. So using that platform just to not exhaust people, I don't think, in terms of having meetings just for the sake of meetings, or to be big brother of sorts and make sure that people are actually doing things, but just so that they don't feel isolated and just so that they don't feel like they're on an island. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah,
Brittany?
I think one of the things that you mentioned that has been a really nice component of working digitally that honestly didn't take place enough when we were in an office is just having that morning coffee. And I think everyone sort of misses having that more like impromptu connection that's not a scheduled meeting about a specific topic. So as a project team, having more organic conversation where we can talk a little bit about the project, but also that's a chance for you to kind of connect and talk about like other things going on and just connect as a team a little bit. And then been hearing some really good ideas that other companies have been doing, like doing matchmaking components within their own company. So every week having coffee with a different person in the company and getting paired with people that they may not normally be able to, have lunch with or connect with and within the office. So yeah, I've been hearing some really cool ways that companies are being a little bit more intentional with building a culture while they're working remotely.
Yeah, workplace mentorship programs are a good thing. Certainly leads to cross-functional and employee development in a lot of regards. And I know organizations who have good corporate cultures have that. So how do you start to replicate that? And I guess maybe as we shift along here, how do we intersperse a little bit of fun with this? Not making a complete farce or a joke of anything, but there are some just neat little icebreaker and kind of fun, lighthearted aspects here within the Microsoft platform. So some things like the Snapchat filtering and the Snap filter, as you can see, one where Garth Algar has joined a meeting from Wayne's World, it looks like, from a few years ago, if you remember. Swing, not worthy. So yeah, so just some different things there to lighten the mood. And I think, everyone's used to having a dog bark in the background or a spouse walk into the room or something like that. You're not human if that hasn't happened yet to you. So I don't know. Anything else? Any interesting encounters you've had on virtual meetings here in the last couple of months you want to share, Brittany?
Oh, I think everyone has. It is just like in one way, it's a little bit refreshing to be able to. I know you and I were in a meeting where someone we have known and been working closely with for the last year. Like now people are being a little more intentional with sharing video, and you get a peek into their life where their 3-year-old's wandering into the meeting. And I think it just kind of, it's kind of cool to see the curtain come down a little bit, and yeah, dogs are barking, and happy that this is happening in a time where we've got these tools where you can throw out a GIF or, like something, and it just helps now communicate sentiment. So it's just not as stale. So we've got all these tools now that make working remotely a little bit more tolerable.
Yeah, that is exactly it. What we did here, just as a share out for everyone to solicit some feedback here internally, we did a bit of a little clicky with my slides. I apologize. We came up with our top 5 tools. So we had a few people here input in terms of what their chosen platform is. Certainly making sure information is connected and people are working in the same environment and all of these pieces talk to each other. So not by any means suggesting that people go off in their own independent fashion and not have a cohesive working structure and format. But here's just a few things that we've seen people are starting to use and gravitate in just within our company. The only thing I'll add, like for example, Kendra on the bottom, one thing that we've noticed in the last little while is by using a pretty effective social media automation tool, she's been able to schedule a lot of our content that goes out via social channels and then propagate that internally using the rest of the workflow automation pieces that are baked into the Microsoft stack, where every morning I get a digest of what her activities are and then information that I can share out to my social network. So it's pretty convenient and pretty handy for us to make use of something like that. Any other thoughts on that one, Britt?
I think we're pretty fortunate that we have had these pieces in place prior to now being forced to all work remotely, but we've been leaning on them especially heavy in the last couple of months. So especially, I know, like our marketing automation piece, we used to have more of a mix of in-person events or in-person interactions, and now a lot of that has been, I guess, pivoted to more marketing automation related components. And like you said, even with our social media automation, all of those have been, I think, things that were maybe on the roadmap for a lot of companies. Like eventually we'll get to that point, and now we're seeing, okay, we really need these like ASAP. It's not a priority B item anymore. So
yeah, with that said, don't necessarily feel bad or feel that you need to do it all at once. Again, the whole impetus for this little 20-minute, half-hour session was by customer demand to just reiterate and reinforce some tips, tricks, tools that people can use to more effectively work from home. And as we say this, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but layering this on in well thought out steps over time is really the path. So, not doing it all at once, but just learning, course correcting, iterating, seeing what's coming out in the market in terms of product enhancements from whether that's Microsoft or other products, and just seeing how that fits into the roadmap for the company, right? Mm-hmm. So some things here, anything that we have for questions here in the chat, maybe let's address some of those, but some further thoughts for anyone here for additional things to maybe keep an eye on, or some further reading if anyone's so inclined. That might be good for them. Let's just see what is up here on the chat.
Yeah, it does look like we have a couple questions coming in here.
All right. Fire when ready, I suppose.
Yeah, so actually we have a question about how we're organizing who can come into the office and when.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We definitely did want to chat on that. So utilizing Microsoft Teams, there is a function or a little add-in bot called Shifts. So that's a very simple click to run app that's just embedded within Microsoft Teams. And actually here, maybe I can swap around my screen and start to show that, in fact, even. But as I'm doing that, the idea being we've created some small work groups within our organization, and then people from that work group can pick who is going to come into the office at that day and that time. So we have a work group of 4 people assigned here, and oops, my slides are getting away from me. I apologize for that. So here within Microsoft Teams, you see the shifts icon. I pop into my shifts, I can see what shifts are available, and then I can request those shifts. So looking at next week here on our calendar, we've been our work group here of 4 people, just based on geographic proximity in the office. So trying to socially distance ourselves, I can pick or request any of these shifts. Basically, we've left it open to people completely by their own volition if they want to come in or if they want to continue to work from home. We have all the appropriate PPE in the office, but if I were to say I wanted to come in to the office here, I could request that shift. It'll slide down into my calendar like you see on June 18th, and then that will be unavailable for the other 3 people or X number of people in my work group. So if you're looking at ways to socially distance but yet return people to the office in a more ongoing fashion, that might be a quick and dirty way to think about using that if you are making use of Teams. What other questions do we have?
There was actually one question about if we had to make a recommendation on what the most important first step to take would be, what would your thoughts on that be, Luke?
First step, around getting everyone working remote. I suppose that's what the context of that question would be. Just make it as accessible as possible for people. What is the core piece of information do they need? And let them expose that out to them with lots of good communications and support. If people feel lost with things, they're probably not going to pick it up and do it, right? So that would be my answer. I don't know, there's, I guess, defining what your starting point is. Everybody's different on that, but if you were just getting going with Microsoft in general, start with a real basic team, put everyone there, and just take down barriers around making people feel stupid if they don't know what they're doing. It's something simple. That's not tied to technology. That's at a interpersonal level. Creating a culture where everyone feels okay to ask questions, I think, would be a big one.
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you think?
Another good question that came in says, what about hoteling? Is it best to just set up desks as resources in Outlook and have people book the desks, or are there other options in Teams? We have about 40 desks available in the office for people to book.
Good question. And I would maybe add one, I guess it depends on the nature of your business and what you're doing, at those desks. Certainly, I'll use an example of just returning to getting a haircut even recently, where the list of your chair at the hair salon is they basically explain what they do in between customers. So is there any kind of PPE or COVID sanitation aspects that you need to take into consideration in terms of hoteling with a desk? I don't know the answers to that, but I think some of that depends on what the provincial return to work legislation looks like. Some of that depends on the nature of your work and just how much contact there is person to person. But setting up a desk or a workspace as a resource in Outlook and then claiming that and booking that like you'd book a conference room, for example, is certainly a viable option, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Actually, we have another question that came in. How has your team handled projects while being remote in terms of delegating tasks and staying on track?
Well, I don't know. Do you want to take a crack at that one first?
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that. So we use Teams, and we have an internal facing team per project, and so it's where we handle all of our customer communication as well. So we have a channel set up. They're invited in as guests. We have a planner set up as a task or as a tab, sorry, and that's where we set up all of our tasks and can also build dashboards on progress there too, and then store all of our meeting notes and relevant files to each project there too. And it's been working great. I know it's helped us internally be able to always find everything, knowing exactly which spot it is. And then again, we have another a tab that's set up to the opportunity within Dynamics, so we can make sure that we just have everything in one spot. It's been a good tool for us.
Certainly leveraging whatever you're using to manage tasks or projects. I'm sure those solutions were in place to some extent before, but just making sure everybody knows how to use them and having regular cadence around what everyone's doing as a group. And I would say maybe even just a footnote on that, having those regular calls, but perhaps maybe not making it mandatory to share your screen, especially if it's internally. I know that becomes a little bit taxing, and I think there's certainly a level of burnout reaching here on the screen sharing aspect. So giving people that option just to be themselves and screen share where it makes sense. But I don't know, taking a hard line and saying it's a video, a face-to-face requirement, obviously on customer-facing external conversations, perhaps that makes a little bit of a difference, but internally where it's not required, maybe becoming a little more lax on that just might help people mentally stick to the game plan, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I've definitely noticed a bit of a wave in that since, I guess, March, April. Everyone was wanting to share video at all moments and use it as a tool to reconnect. And I've been seeing as time goes on, that start to taper off a little bit, because I definitely agree. I think it does get a little bit fatiguing.
Mm-hmm. And speaking as a nice little segue
back.
on that, actually, here we are going to do 2 more of these sessions here next week and the week following, and then take a bit of a sabbatical here for the month of July and just recharge our batteries here. But 2 of the topics we have left on the calendar here next week, we'll look further at data as a service and okay, what does that actually mean? How can you start to incorporate and put some of the foundational pieces in place for your organization so that you're exposing data to both internal and external stakeholders as something they can take and generate some value for you in terms of how your business operates. So lots of interesting dialogue, I'm sure, that will come out of that. If there aren't any other questions, appreciate everyone taking some time here out of their Wednesday afternoon and joining us. And as always, if there is additional feedback, happy to hear it. And thanks again for joining, and enjoy your Wednesday afternoon.